am Daniel Likis, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today, I have my special guest. She's award-winning author, and of course, best-selling author too, no other than Miss Emily Thoroughthread.
Aloha.
Aloha and welcome to Book 101 and of course my love letters. So Miss Emily, can you please introduce yourself?
I'd be happy to. I am an author, a podcast host, a group facilitator. I do all kinds of different things to help people find comfort and support while they're dealing with grief and loss, and to be able to find happiness at the same time, because that's what I found has been missing in most different things that are trying to help people with grief. I have had two husbands die, and after the second one died, I turned to writing. I am a writer. I've written college textbooks and taught writing at the university level for many years, so it just seemed logical to me to help myself through my writing. And that writing that I was doing initially wasn't for anybody else to read. It was just for me to explore what I was experiencing and see what I could figure out what I needed to do next and where I needed to go from there. So I really got a lot out of it and decided that it would be a good way to help others who are also dealing with grief and loss by teaching them how they can do different kinds of writing and have that help them. So I did. I started a group here on Maui where I live, and people would come over to my house and we'd write and talk about what we wrote, and it was very successful. And because of that, and because I had a good friend die suddenly after a few months after my husband died, I just felt like I needed to do more to help my friend's wife. So I started writing to her, and I wrote her every week for a year, and I set out before I started like 52 different topics that I could talk to her about, because I thought if I'm going to commit to writing for a year, I've got to have something to say. And by the time I finished that project, I thought, that's an outline for a book. So that's where my first book on grief came from. And then the next book came from that also. So I have two books out. Loving and Living Your Way Through Grief was my first book. And my most recent one that just became an international bestseller is the Grief and Happiness Handbook.
How does it feel that you are both in two categories, best-selling author and award-winning author?
It feels good. And it mostly feels good because I know that's helping that get the message out. Because if people hear, oh, she's best-selling, or oh, she got awards for what she wrote, then it must be good. So they're more likely to pick it up and read it. So I'm very happy to have those designations.
So what age did you realize that you're good in writing?
Oh, I started actually when I was in junior high school, and it wasn't anything that I was sharing at that point, but I would write stories, and they were just stories from my imagination, because I spent a lot of time alone. So I was just exploring all the different things that I could think of. And it was always kind of comfort for me. I've come across a lot of the things that I used to write and thought, wow, I had quite an imagination back then.
So who are your favorite authors that influence you the most?
Oh, wow. There's such a wide variety of authors. I love Lynn Twist. She's amazing. And her writing style has really influenced me, not only with her writing style, but with her content. She's just really, really good. I Actually, I like so many authors. I can't tell you how many books I've read. 'Cause
What are your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
in writing, it is to. I've got a couple things going on. Short term, I'm getting going here on Maui, writing sessions for people who are dealing with the tragic wildfires that we recently experienced, to help them deal through their loss and grief of that, so that we can come together and be able to express ourselves by writing, and then have an opportunity to talk about it. So that's my short-term goal. Long-term goal is to keep my Grief and Happiness Alliance going and spreading throughout the world. We're training more facilitators now, so more people can have access to our free gatherings that we have, where we write together, and then we talk about what we write, and we learn happiness practices. And the people who come just love it so much that I want as many people as possible to be able to take advantage of that.
Very well said, Miss Emily. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening to these countries according to my ranking tops in the last 30 days. In Zambia, I got number 7 on the Apple chart, Qatar at number 29, Oman at number 33, Slovenia at number 43, Pakistan at number 48, Nigeria at number 69, United Republic of Tanzania number 25, Jordan at number 63, Canada at number 86. Of course, in Cambodia 113, Zimbabwe at 130, Egypt at 136, Indonesia at 158, South Africa at 182, Norway at 183, and last but not the least, Belgium at 234. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Miss Emily Thoroughthread.
And that's amazing numbers.
Thank you, Miss Emily. And the Grief and Happiness Handbook, how did you crafted it?
Well, I made it in a way that it wasn't just a story, because when I was initially dealing with grief from losing my husband, I found lots of books were very interesting books, and I could feel for the people who wrote them, who were writing memoirs that especially about their experiences of losing a loved one. And while they were interesting, I didn't feel like they were helping me. And so when I wrote a book on that subject, I wanted to have something in there that would help people. So each chapter in my books is on a different subject that has to do with dealing with grief or loss. And then it has, at the end of each chapter, exercises that you can actually write in the book on what you learned or discovered through writing that chapter. So through my reading my book, there are also writings through my book.
Yes, and according to Miss Phil Anna, the Grief and Happiness Handbook will bring happiness and joy to the reader. So, Miss Emily, what are the elements that you put in the book that make your readers glued to it?
Well, I do a combination of self-reflection of my experiences and experiences of other people. So it's a broad range of people instead of having it just be my perspective. And then having the variety of subjects that each time they read one, they go, well, I wouldn't have thought of thinking of that having to do with grief before. And it really helps them to think.
And according to Miss Wanda, this book is helpful beyond measure. So what are the helpful tips that you shared to the book that you want to share to us today?
Well, as I said, each chapter is a little bit different. And there's, for instance, a chapter that's on gratitude. And people say, well, how can you be grateful for grieving? Well, it's a process, a very natural process. And by spending your time with paying attention to your grief, it allows you to have a richer experience that can really help support you through the rest of your life. And another chapter, for instance, is on happiness. And I get the same question about that. How can you grieve and be happy at the same time? And that's kind of my whole point in writing, is to show people that it's good to be happy. It's good to have a life you can smile about, and find people that you can share those smiles with and feel good with.
Yes, thank you for writing this book, Miss Emily. And according to Cheryl, give yourself permission. How would you comment on that?
Well, it's really important, because one of the things I notice all the time is people get in their own way. They somehow kind of make up things like, oh, I can't be happy, I'm grieving. Well, that's not giving yourself permission to be able to find your way through grief and be able to move forward. So you need to be able to give yourself permission to move forward.
Yes, and according to Amazon customer, grief and happiness truly can coexist. Wow.
I believe that.
Can you share to us, Miss Emily, experience that you're saying that grief and happiness truly exist?
Oh, well, for instance, in dealing with my grief, I had a great grandchild be born, and that brought me so much happiness. And if I would have just been so sad and pulled down by my grief, I would have missed out on that. But by looking at her pictures and seeing how beautiful she is and what a wonderful life she's starting, that brings me happiness. And I feel really good that I can allow myself to be happy while I'm grieving.
Yes, definitely. Based on your experience, right?
Yes.
That'd be awesome. And according to Miss Sharon, excellent resource for grieving folks, that those who care about them. I love reading your reviews. They are so great.
Oh, thank you. There's a whole lot of them there too.
Yes, there's a lot, and oh my goodness, and really inspiring. So, Miss Emily, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, as I said before, it was writing those letters to my friend every week for a year in her grief after she lost her husband suddenly. I got so much out of the process of writing those letters, not just the fact that I wrote them and sent them to her, and trying to help her and provide comfort for her. I found I was doing the same thing for me by the writing that I was doing. And with the way I wrote my book, with all the exercises in the book that you can write out as you're reading, I am able to provide the same opportunity to people that are seeking a different way to help them move forward in their grief.
What challenges did you face while writing this book?
Well, one of the things that happened was I mentioned that I was having people come over to my house to do the writing class sessions, and the pandemic happened. So all of a sudden, I didn't have my group that I started out with, that I was able to bounce ideas off and try things out on. And so I just figured out a way to do it online instead of having people come to the house. And that was a good challenge for me to work out, because I've been able to help a whole lot more people online, because the whole world is my audience instead of just the people who live on Maui.
How do you deal with writer's block?
You know, I generally don't have writer's block. But when I do get a little stuck, I do something that I always taught my students when I was teaching at the university, and that's free writing, where you just start writing with a pen on paper and not just on the computer, but you start writing and you write without taking your pen off that paper for a designated amount of time, like 10 minutes, just write without stopping. Don't judge what you're writing. You're not writing about anything in particular, just whatever it is that comes up in your mind. And by using this technique, you kind of empty out your mind of all those things that are blocking you, because your monkey mind in there might be saying something like, you can't do this, or I don't know why you think you're a writer, or those sorts of things. Well, if you write all that stuff down, then you don't have to keep saying it. It's gone because you expressed it already, and it opens up space for you to be able to be creative and write whatever you want to.
Miss Emily, what's your daily writing routine like?
I get up the very first thing I do in the morning, and I get up really early, is to write. And I have a journal right at my bedside, and I sit up and I start writing. And I have a kind of pattern that I follow of certain things that I do every day. Like I always write every day about what I want to be doing with my writing, with what I enjoy about my writing. I write about my experiences that I want to remember with my writing, and I always express my gratitude for at least several things. And I always write down something that brought me joy the day before. And by starting my day by writing like this, it helps me bring things into focus so that I can realize that I am happy and that I do have lots of things to say with my writing.
So, how do you feel your personal experiences have shaped your writing?
Oh, they're all about what I'm writing. My feelings, how things happened, what went on. A lot of times, especially when people really experience grief for the same time, since they haven't experienced it before, they don't really know what it's supposed to be. And a hint here, it's not supposed to be anything in particular. It's different for everybody. But by having opportunities to see what others are experiencing as they go through the process also, it provides a lot of support and comfort.
Very well said, Miss Emily. So, how has the publishing process been for you?
It's been very interesting. For instance, when I wrote my college textbooks, all I had to do was write them and work with them on my editing process, and then they handled everything else. They marketed, they sold them. I didn't have to have anything to do with that. They occasionally would send me out to do a talk someplace about what I wrote in my book or that sort of thing. But besides that, I didn't have to do that. Where when you don't write in the academic field, you're responsible for a whole lot. And my first publisher of Living and Living Your Way Through Grief was a traditional publisher where I had a company and an editor, and they did most of that sort of thing for me. But they didn't do the marketing. They didn't go out and sell the books. And I was unprepared for that because that had always been my experience in the past. So I had to figure out how to develop my own platform with social media. Started writing a blog, which I've written for 4 years now, every week. I then started my podcast, my Grief and Happiness podcast, and all that led to me having the Grief and Happiness Alliance, which is the group I mentioned that meets online every week. And I've learned a lot in the process of trying to get my own message out.
But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Love Letters. Love Letters are a collection of love stories of people get lost, get crazy, and disoriented in the name of love. we will learn from them, and well, just like Miss Emily, the book, The Grief and Happiness Handbook. Well, inspiring message for those aspiring writers out there.
Write your passion. when you really care deeply about something, it's so much easier to write. Things can just flow forward through you. And the wonderful relationships I had with my husbands and missing them when they were gone was such an inspiration to me to write about that. And the more I write about it, the more happiness, the more joy I feel. So write about your passion, things that ultimately will bring you joy.
Miss Emily, can you recite few of the stanza of your letters?
Well, when you mention letters, it reminds me of one of the exercises that I like to do most with people when we're talking about dealing with grief and finding happiness. And that is to write letters to the person that you loved and who has died. Write them a letter. Tell them everything that you'd tell them if they were sitting right there next to you. And this really helps because you know that you feel their presence, but this way you get to more experience that. And when I finish writing those letters, what I encourage the people to do is to write a letter back to them from their loved one. Like if I wrote a letter to my husband, Ron, after I finished that letter, I would write a letter from Ron to me to see what he had to say to me. And it's amazing what comes out in that second letter.
Wow. Interesting, Miss Emily. So can you please invite our listeners to buy the Grief and Happiness Handbook?
Oh, of course. I would love everybody to buy the Grief and Happiness Handbook that is available all places that books are sold. And in addition to that, I just had come out last week the Grief and Happiness cards. And those cards it's a box of cards, just a flat card, not a folding card, that you can pull a card out of that pile every week that will give you the inspiration of those 52 letters that I wrote initially. Each one of them has something different about the content of each of those 52 letters. And then on the other side, there's a beautiful picture that I've taken of Maui, each 52 different pictures of flowers and beaches and all the beauty that's here that just help you feel good while you're reading the comfort and support of those cards.
Yes, let's support Miss Emily because if you support her, more books to come.
That's for sure.
Are you developing a next book?
I've got like 3 or 4 of them on the burner because I keep going, oh, I could write this or I could write that, So I'm keeping notes on different books and I'll see which set of notes gets the most traction to start off with and go from there.
Miss Emily, thank you for your talents that you shared to us. Lots of people inspired, lots of people learned from it, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Bodycom people, see you soon.